Hello everyone, welcome to this course lesson. I am Chidumen Namdi. In this video, we are going to learn about the rarely used Angular feature, which is the ngTemplate. We are going to learn what it is and how it functions, and also how to use it to our own advantage. Now let's begin. The ngTemplate is an Angular element that defines a template that is not rendered by default. Now look at, we have a template here. For example, now this template is rendered immediately this component is rendered in the DOM. So that's why we are seeing it. But if we encase this element inside the ngTemplate, it will no longer be rendered. Now let's see it, ngTemplate. So this is how we define an ngTemplate element. Now we close it. So it is just similar to default elements that we have in HTML. So this is an Angular template element, and this is how we'll write it. Now we see we encased it inside, we encased this h1 welcome to ngTemplate demo inside the ngTemplate Angular element. Now as you can see in our DOM, we are no longer seeing this because we have rendered it inside the ngTemplate element. Now the question arises, how do we then render this? Now to render it, we use the directive ngTemplateOutlet and pass the name of this template to it. Now how do we pass the name of this template? We simply define it as follows. We first use the hashtag, then now followed by the name we want to assign this template. Now let's write it to be welcome template. Now this welcome template becomes the name of this template, and now with this name we can now render this template anywhere in our in this component. Mind you, we cannot render this template outside of this component. It must be inside of where it is defined. Now let's see how we can render it. Now we will say div. Now let's close it. Now let's render our template inside here. Then how do we do it? We will use the ngTemplateOutlet. Now first, the ngTemplateOutlet component is a standalone component, so we need to first import it inside our imports array like this. Then we'll now write ngTemplateOutlet. So you can see the ngTemplateOutlet component is inside the Angular/common module. This is where we get it. So it's and also it's a structural directive. Now to render this welcome template, we'll first write an asterisk here, then followed by ngTemplateOutlet, then followed by the name of the template here, which is the welcome template. Now when we save this, it will render in our DOM. Now what happened there is that this ngTemplate directive got hold of this ngTemplate because it was assigned to it via the name of the template. Then it generated DOM from this template and rendered it in between these div tags. Now whenever ngTemplate renders a template, it removes the parent element it was rendered on. So therefore, in this case, this div goes away from the DOM. We cannot access this div once this test component renders and this ngTemplate renders this template. So we cannot access this div again. So this is one of the things we need to know using the ngTemplate. Now let's take a look at our DOM to confirm this. Now go to our approach, our component. So you see we only have the h1. We do not see the div. Yeah, this is because the ngTemplate generates this, renders this in between the div, then gets the DOM of this, removes div and renders this template in between it. So after the rendering, we cannot get hold of this div element again. Now, so in this case, instead of using div, we will use the ng container. In our next lesson, we will talk about the ng container. Now, in a nutshell, the ng container is used to hold element that we don't want, is used to hold content that we don't want to add an additional HTML element to the DOM. Now let's look at the definition. You see, okay, this doesn't have a definition, but this is what the ng container does. If we don't want to add an extra element over a content, we can use ng container. So we replaced the div with this ng container because the div will be removed from the DOM when the ng template is rendered, and if we try accessing it, we cannot get it. So it's one of the best practices to use ngTemplateOutlet with ng container, so that we know that yes, ng container is not rendered at all on the DOM. It's just used as a placeholder to write this ng template and also get an actual place in the DOM so as to render whatever template it wants to render. So this is the basic shell how we can use ng template to dynamically render elements to our DOM in Angular. Now we can use as many as ng templates that we want in our Angular component, and also we can use a template and create so many containers from it, as many as we want. There are no limited number. See, we can still render it here, and it will render. Then we can create another ng template also. Let's say ngTemplate, now say demo template. So here we can just say hello demo template. So you see, demo template, if we don't use it, it will not render. So we can use it in place of here, and you see it, and it will render. So we can pass as many templates we want, render as many we want, and they will still work. Now let's look at how we can pass variables and also how we can use variables in templates. Now let's start by defining, let me say, a counter variable here. Now we can use this counter inside this template and also inside this template. So we can use any member variables or call functions inside a component in any templates that we want. So this counter will be visible in all the templates. So we can just render it like this. So you see, we can use them, and you see, it will render. So all variables defined in a template are all visible in the body of the templates. Now we can create variables only visible within a template. Now let's see how it is done. First, let's remove this counter. Now, and also let's use only one template for now to avoid confusion. Let me remove this demo template, then remove it here. So we have our code like this. It will be understandable. Now we can create variables like this and pass it to a template, and it will be only alive inside that template. Now to create it, we'll use what is called as ngTemplateOutletContext. So this is a context used to pass variables to templates, and those variables are only alive within the context of that template. So if we pass the variable to this welcome template, they will only be available only inside this welcome template context. Now how do we do it? There are so many ways we can pass variables to a template. First, we can use the outlet context. Now to do that, we'll have to pass it to this ng container. So after the template outlet, we will now pass the template context. Now we'll now pass it like this. Pass it like this. Now inside here, we will now pass our context variables. Now, context variables are inside a context object. Now, the keys and the values will now be passed to the template, and now the template can now reference the keys of the context inside the ngTemplate and then be able to access the value from the key. Now, let me demonstrate it. Now, first, when we are using, if we are using ngTemplateOutletContext like this, then we will not use the asterisk here. We'll have to change it to brackets. Now, here we will now pass our object. Remember, I said context, there are objects, and now the keys will, are what is passed to this ngTemplate, and with the key we can now access the value inside it, inside this template. Now, let's set a key to this object now. Let's say hello. Hello, like this. Now we have set a variable. Now this variable now, by doing so, is now passed to this welcome template. Now the question is then, now how do we now access this? Now the question is, how do we now access these variables inside this welcome template? It's very simple. To access this hello variable inside this welcome template, first we will write let followed by a hyphen, then followed by the name of the variable we want to assign it to. Now let's just assign it to hello var, then followed by this, the equal sign, then we'll open and close string. Then inside here is where we will pass the property name of the variable inside this object that we want to access inside this template. Now here we want to access the hello property so that we can get this word value. Now what we add here now is hello. So you see, now this is just like declaring variable in JavaScript, declaring and assigning value to JavaScript. So it's just like doing this hello var. So you see, but now in this case, now the value here is the value there. Or let's even make it more this thing. Now say hello so that we can understand it very well. So that we will now come here and now say ctx.hello. So this is an example of what we are doing by this. So you see that Angular templating engine gives us something similar that we are doing in JavaScript, so that we don't delve from what we already know. Now, so you see, now this context is just like this context variable here, an object, and now we just use the hello var variable to access the hello inside this context object. So that now this hello var will now contain the value world. This is exactly what is happening here. So we are now declaring a variable hello var with the let keyword, then accessing the hello property inside the context variable. So now with this, Angular already knows that you're accessing a variable inside the context of the welcome template. So it will just look up this ngTemplateOutletContext, grab the object, and then I use the dot property or bracket notation. Now using this string we pass here as a key to now extract the value here. So now with this, now we can now use this hello var inside this template to access, to now render the variable world. So we will now say, let's render it. We will now say we can now render hello var. So you see what we defined here now will appear. Now mind you, this hello var is only visible inside here, just like we have in JavaScript. It is block scoped. It does not it's not visible outside its scope. So we cannot use the hello var here. Cannot use it. We'll run into error. So you cannot use it. It's only visible only inside the template. If we create another template like this, template, okay, let's call it test template. We cannot even access the hello var. So inside it, we cannot access it at all. So you see, the whatever we define here is only visible inside within the particular template it was defined. So now that's it. We have seen how to declare context variable using ngTemplateOutletContext, and then get the variable inside and template using this let variable style. Now we can define as many variables as we want. Now let's say age 90. Now let's say name John Doe. We can access all of them here. Let's say age. Can still access all of them. Let name. Now we can still use here. We are using the name of the property that we are accessing for clarity's sake, so that we know, okay, we are getting the age. So it is not a must that we must use the name of the property. You see how I explained it using the JavaScript code. So it is not a must, it must be the name of the property. So we can just change it. But in this case, we are using the name of the property as the name of the variable for clarity's sake and for best practices, so that we will know what we are pointing to. So now we can come here and render age. So everything will be rendered. Then name, can now render name. So you see everything will be rendered. So you see it, everything will be rendered. So you see how we can access variables in context in ngTemplate context. Now Angular allowed us to assign an implicit variable in this ngTemplateOutlet context. Now this implicit variable is used to assign a default value to the context. Now let's see what we mean by just a demo. The implicit begins with $, so as to tell us that it is inbuilt, that what JavaScript expect if you assign anything to it is just to make it the default value of the context object. Now let's just call the default value just the default. Now, by being a default value, what we mean is that if we access it in the template without declaring the value, the property where we Angular should get the value from, then Angular now picks up this implicit as its value. Like, let me say, for example, in this let hello var, see that we declared a variable hello var only available within this ngTemplate, and now we're not assigning to a value hello, which is now telling Angular that it should get the value of this hello var from the hello property inside a context object. Now, without this, without that line or without that code telling it hello, now what it is telling to JavaScript now is get the hello var, but this time we are not telling it from where in the context object where to get the value from. Now, what Angular does in this case is now to get it from the implicit key. So now here now the value of this hello var now will now be this string default value. So now let's render it here. Oh, okay, sorry, it is already rendered. So now if we save this, what will be rendered here will no longer be world, but this default value. So now when we save it, you see it. So this is the work of the implicit value, the implicit property in context object. So like we said, it takes the default value of the object, the default value of the context object, so that if a variable is defined in the template without telling Angular where they get the value from, then Angular gets the value from the implicit property defined in the context object.
If the implicit is not defined like this, and this does not tell Angular where to get its value from, then the value here will be undefined. Nothing will be shown there. So you see, nothing will be shown there at all. Now let's look at another way how we can define our context variable without using this. Now first, let's copy this. Let's cut it off. Now we can define this also in another way. We can define it inside this ngTemplateOutlet directive. Now, but to do that, we need to remove these square brackets and add the asterisk back. Now, to define it, we will now have to add a semicolon, then followed by a context, then this, and then we'll paste our object. This still works. You'll see it still works. And also we can define our implicit back. Or we can just only use one string like this. So it's an object to add our. So you see it's back. So we can define context like this also in one straight line without using the outlet context. So this is how we do it.
Now the ng template comes in handy whenever we want to conditionally render group of elements. Now let's see an example now. First, we need to remove, let me remove all this context. Let me remove this context and now remove everything we have in this template for now, so that what will be seen next will be quite clear to us. Now, okay, let's remove this. Now, let's say we are rendering counter. Now, let's just have a counter. This thing here. Sorry, we're rendering counter like this. Div counter. Now we only want to render this counter if it is greater than 0. But when it is less than 0, we will have to display no counter. So to do it, we know we are going to use the ngIf. So we use the traditional ngIf. We'll have to import it because it's an standalone component. Now we'll come here and say ngIf counter. We'll render it. Now, but when 0, to not render. So it doesn't render. Now, so we want, if the counter is greater than 0, we show this. But if it is not greater, if it is like less than 0, then it should display counter is negative. Now, how do we do it? We are going to use the else keyword. Now we write else. Now, after this else, we are not going to pass in the name of the template we want to render if this condition is not met. Now we want to render this welcome template. So let's just change its name to else template. So we'll just write the else here. So it will render this template whenever the counter is equals to 0 or less than 1. So we will now come here and now write counter is less than 0. So you see this template will now be called if this condition is not met. So you see how we can use the template to conditionally render parts of our UI. So in this case, this will not be rendered if this condition is not met, else this template will not be rendered. But if this condition is met, now this template or this element will be rendered, while this will not be rendered at all. So in this case, we have effectively added ngIfElse in our Angular template. So now let's test it to see. Let's make this 0. You see, the template else template is rendered. Counter is less than 0. Is rendered here. Now also we can use the ngIf then and else statement too. Also we use the same template for it. Now let's create a template for the then keyword. Now let's call it then. Now this then keyword is executed if the condition here is met. So nothing, this will not be executed. Now first we'll come here and write then name of the template, then template, like this. Now in this case, whenever we add this then, this will no longer be rendered or executed when this expression is true. Instead, the then template will be rendered. So let's make this 90 so that you see it in action. So you see this is no longer rendered. So this then template is rendered now.
Now, since this then template is rendered when this condition is true, then we have no need of this div and this here. So we have to remove it, then convert this div into ngContainer. So now let me copy it and put here. Now, so this, it makes our code very neat. We can differentiate now which section is rendered when the if condition is true and which section is rendered when the if condition is false. So we have demarcated everything and make it very easy to understand and use.
Now we are done with the ngIf. Now let's look at ngFor. Now we'll clean this. Now let's say we have an array of fruits. And then let's clean this out. And then we want to render our array of fruits. So we're going to use the ngFor. So how do we use it? First the asterisk, then ngFor. Then inside this we'll now add our expression let fruit of fruits now we'll now render like this inside here. But first we need to import ngFor. We need to import it because it's a standalone component. So we render our fruits here like this. Now we can convert this to use the ngTemplate. Now look at the conversion now. Template. Let me remove this copilot. Sorry. Now, first, remember what we did with the ngTemplate initial in this video lesson. Now, first, what we have to do is the ngFor like this. Then we will now get the variable from the context and assign it to fruit. Then the ngFor of, we will now pass it the fruit to loop over. Then inside here now, we can now render the fruit variable from here. Now let's remove this. Now you see that this works. Now if you can remember what we did initially with the ngTemplate, so that now when we render this ngFor here, this ngFor now is a directive, and now it uses this ngTemplate now to render all the fruits passed to its input via this ngFor directive.
Now it uses it, then uses this DOM where this ng template was rendered. Now to get the value of the ng template ref, the view container ref, and then loop through the fruits and then display them. Now, where does this come from? Remember that we said that whenever we define a variable in an ng template without assigning where the value will come from the context variable, that Angular will assign it the implicit value. Now, if we delve inside the source code of ngFor, you will see that the ngFor passes as implicit variable each iteration of the fruit here. So it will pass the implicit variable like this. Each iteration it will not pass it the fruit, so that it now becomes the default value of the context variable. So that when we access this like this, we will now get the value of each iteration here. So that when the ngFor renders this becomes the current element of the implicit value, which will contain the current element in the iteration. So now in the first iteration of this fruit variable, the implicit variable will be the first element apple. So that's why you have apple here rendered. In the second iteration, the implicit variable will have banana. So that's why we have banana here, and so on. The third iteration, the implicit variable will have the third element, which is the orange. So that's why we have the orange here. So that's what happened here. So you can see that how Angular works and how it uses everything internally. So whenever we access an implicit variable in ngFor, we are getting the element in the array for each iteration. So you see that this is equal to this. So now the sugars into this ng template. In the next course lessons coming, I will show how the internal structure of ngIf, and we'll build our own so that we'll see how ngFor renders elements. So you see now we can also even get some implicit variables from ngFor context. Now it has odd, even, index. We can get it from it like this here. Can get odd, like when using it like this, you can get odd like this. Now say you see we can get odd, because odd just displays if the current iteration is an odd number. Now we can also do the same thing here, because we know that this odd now is a context variable brought in by the ngFor. So we can do the same thing. Now access the value odd. So it renders. But let's break this up so that we will know. So this is the traditional one. This is the new syntactic sugar of this. So you see it still gives us the same thing. So you see it still gives us the same thing. Let me wrap this in div so that you can get all of them in new lines. So you see that we are accessing the context variable from the ngFor context object, and we know that we have odd variable there, so we are accessing it and then assigning to this odd variable name. Now we can also just make this odd var and it will still be the same. Just change it in the template and it will render the same. Now also we have even. You can get even like this. And then we'll come here and say even and render even. So you see it will render. So this is how ngTemplate works, and also how we can access the template context variables and objects and then display their values here. Now remember, these context variables is only available
in the ng template we are currently using it. We cannot access this variable outside of this template. We cannot access it. So it's only usable and visible inside the ng template context.
We have come to the end of this video lesson. Now you can comment if you have any question, or you need some clarity on some of the concepts that we touched in this video lesson. Also, you can like and share this video to your friends or to any developers you know that might need it in all your social media handles. Please like and share, and please subscribe for more content like this. In the next content, I'm going to teach on how we can create our own ngFor and also ngIf, so as to see how they work inside. Thank you, and see you in the next video lesson. Bye.